Hi, welcome to the weekly SDSU Center for Autism Research Spotlight, where we are highlighting the wonderful research that's conducted by our center members. We wanted to take advantage of this stay-at-home order that we're going through right now in San Diego and during this COVID-19 pandemic in order to showcase all the work that our center is doing in the San Diego autism community. My name is Janice Chan, and I'm the administrative coordinator here at the center.
And I am Vinton Omaleki, Community Engagement Director. Today we are speaking with Dr. Kelsey Dickson, Assistant Professor in the Department of Child and Family Development. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
No, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Let's jump right in. So, Dr. Dickson, what area of autism research do you focus in?
So my research kind of broadly focuses on trying to develop and test interventions for kids with autism that are not only effective, but that aim to kind of meet the service needs and the service settings in which they're being delivered in. So this includes both, obviously, making sure that it's going to be something that fits the needs of the child and their family, but also kind of at a higher level fits the needs of the organizations and providers who are providing the services. So making sure that, it fits with the kind of the functioning and strengths and weaknesses of the child and the family, and as well as kind of maybe the service model that agency or organization, and as well as kind of the way that provider likes to work with families. So while I broadly focus on services for kids with autism, I have a particular emphasis on mental health services. And then one way in which I'm trying to kind of really focus on or address mental health services is through focusing on interventions that look at a key factor that's involved in both autism, but also several kind of mental health conditions that commonly are seen amongst individuals with autism. And so this is called executive functioning. And oftentimes we think of this as like a set of higher order abilities or skills that you really need in order to be able to engage successfully with your life, right? So those things that actually help you, achieve tasks on a day-to-day basis, or actually kind of complete your homework, for example, for kids, or make sure that you successfully get to work on time and those kind of things. And so that's kind of how I go about trying to improve some of the services for kids with autism.
Cool.
And so you kind of already touched on this, but tell us a little bit why your research is really important and kind of what excites it about for you.
So I think the reason that I am excited about my research is because I feel like we can really make have a real life impact on not only kids and their families, but also providers and organizations. So ways that we can really just improve the way that providers work with families and improve the impact that those services have on the lives of kids and families who are being served. And I think a particular part of my research that I think is especially important is the focus on mental health. So for a long time, mental health has kind of been largely overlooked in a lot of ways in terms of individuals with autism. And so, but we know that those individuals have really immense mental health needs, right? So as many as 70 or 80% of individuals with autism have mental health, either conditions or challenges that really warrant mental health services. And so, but we also know that because mental health has been overlooked, a lot of times a lot of mental health providers don't really feel equipped or comfortable or knowledgeable about serving individuals on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. They just, a lot of what we know is that they just say, I haven't had any training in terms of autism. And so I don't really know how to best serve these individuals that are on my caseloads. So I think that's what I think is the most important part about this, is really focusing on an area of immense need, but also kind of the way in which we go about it. So what I also really like about my research is that it's very community engaged and very collaborative amongst individuals in the community, right? So it's not as though I'm collecting data in my lab or anything like that. I really do work in real world settings, in mental health clinics, where providers are actually kind of on the front lines providing services, and where families actually tend to receive services. And I love that because, I'm a mental health therapist by training, and so it allows me to kind of return to my roots in many ways and really stay connected with a lot of individuals in the community. And then I also, in many ways, not only am I kind of working in these settings, but I'm working with these individuals from the community. So I'm working with families and parents of youth with autism, and I'm working with providers and organizational leaders to, throughout all of my work, to really make sure that these interventions that I'm focusing on are going to be something that, that fits the needs that are there, that are relevant, that are feasible, and that people want or need. So that's kind of the things that, for me, really excite me about some of the things we're doing in my lab. So
great. Love the community-based aspect of what you're doing and involving them as part of the development of the interventions. You kind of shared a little bit about this already, but could you tell us a little bit about like how you got into this line of work and your background in relation to executive functioning?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I am a psychologist by training, a child clinical psychologist. So I was always focused on mental health and providing mental health services for individuals, kind of broadly, and with a special interest in serving children and their families. But as part of a lot of my work as a psychologist, I was doing a lot of assessments and neuropsychological evaluations, and was really struck by that, every, like the majority of individuals that I was working with, they may have come in for various reasons, right? So maybe they had some kind of recent like concussion or head trauma that kind of contributed to needing an evaluation to see where they were functioning. Or maybe they just had some long-standing kind of issues, learning issues, or otherwise they were just needing to get evaluated to determine appropriate services. But kind of across the cases, one of the things I was noticing is that everyone was coming in, and the majority of the individuals really were demonstrating these kind of executive functioning challenges, right? So difficulty tracking what they were doing or monitoring kind of, their progress on tasks, for example, or difficulties with inhibition, like they would just do things without thinking in a lot of cases, or oftentimes they get stuck and have difficulty shifting. And so I was just kind of, it struck me how, across all the different individuals I was working with, executive functioning seemed to be a really big piece of what was impairing their success in day-to-day life. And then, so that was kind of my evaluation hat, if you want to have that on. But also in treatment, I was kind of then noticing more and more like, wait a second, these same issues are cropping up for a lot of the kids and families that I'm working with, regardless of if they came in with, predominantly trying to get treatment for things like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, or anxiety, or regardless if they're on the spectrum or not. Like these same things are impairing their day-to-day life. So for me, it was like that kind of training and experience that got me thinking about whether or not we could better serve a wide spectrum of individuals who may have different kind of presenting concerns or problems or strengths or weaknesses by targeting with this one kind of really key factor that's impacting their day-to-day life. So that's really kind of how I got where I am. And then I think as I was doing this work, I really was passionate about trying to kind of improve services. And so I think for me, I had an idea of what I think would be maybe a really potent or powerful way to improve the actual interventions and services being delivered. I was also really cognizant of the fact that there's a lot I don't know, and I don't know kind of exactly what sort of what interventions need to look like, or maybe the ways in which we need to kind of tailor them, or other factors we want to make sure to target with these interventions in really community-based service settings. I've worked there, but in these settings, so I have some idea, but really the people who know best are those people who are either delivering or receiving services in the community. And so I kind of really adopted this community partnered approach, because I recognize that that without that, like this work wouldn't be as useful and wouldn't have as much impact. So I think it was kind of together that got me to my current projects, which really aim to incorporate a lot of community input and work very closely with community members to try to develop and implement these interventions.
Great. And so now just tell us a little bit about your project, the one you're currently working on. Kind of what does the study look like from a participant's perspective? And what does the study entail?
Yeah. So my study kind of has 3 parts. The main aim, however, is to really take an existing intervention that targets executive functioning and adapt it and then test it in mental health settings. So this intervention has been really proven to work, but in school-based settings, mainly because that's just where it was developed. Then there hasn't been a lot of work looking at trying to target this executive functioning topic in mental health settings. And so kind of the aim of my project is to really kind of try to adapt this to make it more feasibly fit in mental health settings, which, as many of you are probably aware, you could imagine are very different than school-based settings, right? Mm-hmm. And so we have different people delivering it, different, in school settings, they're generally group-based, but in mental health, that's not always the case, right? So there's obviously some tweaks that we need to make. And then I'm also gonna develop what we call kind of implementation supports, or kind of a plan or a playbook, if you will, of ways that we can better support providers and organizations' delivery of this intervention. So that's kind of the main aims, is we're going to kind of adapt this intervention and develop this like playbook for how to use it, and then test it in mental health clinics. And there's 3 main parts. The first part is kind of nearing the end, but we're still looking for people to help us with, is, as I said, I have some ideas for ways in which I think, we could better tailor this or adapt this intervention for mental health, but I recognize that I'm not the expert on this, right? The community members are the people who really know, people who are on the front line. So having them participate in some surveys and interviews or focus groups where they kind of share with us the ways in which they feel that this needs to be changed in order to really be to fit the needs of these youth and their families, or the way that providers provide services. So we're doing that first. And so that involves just very short kind of participation of one time participating in a survey or a focus group. And then we're going to use the results from that first part to inform our actual adaptation of the intervention. And I'm going to, again, continue to work with a select number of community partners to kind of change it and adapt it. And then the last part involves actually testing it in mental health clinics. So we're going to kind of, again, return to the community and have a group of providers who are working with youth and their families actually test it in mental health settings to see how does it work and how does it fit in these settings.
Awesome.
Well, I answered the whole thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, it just shows what a long process it is to really develop a good intervention. And so I think that every piece is important, and it sounds like you're at the very start of it. Mm-hmm. Do you have any analyses done on any interviews or focus groups that you might be able to share as far as what things people are kind of telling you about what they might want to know about, or what include in this new intervention?
So some kind of very initial findings is that that we're getting back from both providers and caregivers is this idea that everyone is seeing the value in the impact of something like executive functioning on youth and their families. So providers are saying, we see this is having a big impact on kids that we're serving, and the kind of problems or challenges they're presenting with in mental health. And we think that, and that it's really impacting even our work with them in many ways, right? Like the ways in which people are engaging in services. But there were also, and parents, caregivers kind of initially are saying similar things, like we definitely see the impact on my child and their ability to function on the day-to-day. But we're also seeing that people are saying, yeah, and I think it's important, but I don't necessarily know really what to do about it, right? So they don't know, how do I understand the nature of executive functioning in kids or assess it? And I don't really know the best way to target it. So so that's kind of key data for us of like, okay, so we want to be able to make sure our intervention provides a large amount of tools, both for parents and providers, to really help teach them the ways to really improve this or target this key factor.
And can folks still participate in this first phase?
Yes, absolutely. So we are still looking both for providers who serve, some mental health providers who have experience working with these youth and their families in mental health settings to participate. But we're also especially really looking for caregivers of kids on the spectrum who have experience in mental health services. So they've either, their child received it previously or that they are currently receiving it in some fashion to participate. And again, as I mentioned, this first part is quite brief, but super important. So, you can either participate in a one-time survey or a one-time focus group. And so it won't take very long, but it's kind of the meat and potatoes of this project, because we want your feedback with regards to kind of what you think and how we could adapt this intervention to better help these kids, right? This is really the kind of key part before we begin to change and test out this intervention.
Great. And how can participants learn about how to participate in the research?
They can either contact me directly, but we've also kind of put some pieces on the SDSU Center for Autism Facebook group and websites and things like that. So they can find that there, or they can kind of contact me directly if they're interested and feel like they'd be a good fit.
Yeah, good. Then we will make sure to provide links and whatnot so that folks who are watching this video can reach out to you directly.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think this topic of executive functioning is especially important because in some of the focus groups that Vinton and I were able to run with caregivers as well as adults on the autism spectrum, executive functioning issues did come up. And so we were wondering if people are interested in learning more about executive functioning, do you have any trusted resources that you'd recommend gaining more information about, even defining what executive functioning is, or how parents and other caregivers can really be helping their loved ones with autism with this topic?
I think the unique thing about executive functioning is that it's something that impacts everyone, right? Regardless of if you would characterize yourself as on the spectrum or not. It's something that we all have, right? And something we all actually struggle with from time to time. If you ever think of the time in which you are sleep deprived and or you're stressed, maybe like now perhaps, and you have a hard time even keeping track of like what you read the same sentence 6 times and you realize you don't actually encode any of it or understand what you read. Or, my favorite that I'm doing a lot recently is like, I will walk around my house trying to look for my phone, and then after 5 minutes of this, I realize it's in my hand. Right? And so those are all great examples of how on a day-to-day basis, my executive functioning is challenged, right? I can't monitor what I'm doing and realize that my phone's in my hand, or I can't monitor that I'm reading the same sentence 6 times. And so it's something that really anyone can kind of benefit from. And there are a number of really nice resources that are available. I would say that there's a couple of kind of nice books that are available on Amazon for not very much. I would say less than probably like $30 to $35, that including books called, I think, the Everyday Challenges of Executive Functioning, who are written by some of my collaborators who are experts in this area. And there's some nice work done by Russell Barkley as well, and some books by Richard Gallagher called Organizational Skills Training is a nice one, where that's one that parents can get, similar with that first book about everyday executive functioning challenges, that you can just give you tips for how to support not only your loved ones, but yourself as well, in trying to promote these skills on a regular basis.
Awesome.
And I can also send kind of a very, very short list of websites and books and resources as well.
Yeah, perfect. We can post that, and that'd be fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our community, Dr. Dickson. It's been a real pleasure. We appreciate your time and the impact that you have in autism research.
Yeah.
And audience, if you want to learn more about our center and our center members, you can find us at autism.sdsu.edu.
Or you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our handle for all three of those is at SDSU Autism. And we'll see you next time for our next research spotlight. Until then, we hope that you can stay safe, stay healthy, and that you remember to wash your hands.